Today is September 18th,
Right.
1986. My name is Joe Todd, and this is an interview with Mr. Karl Togert
Togert, right.
in Okarche, Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
Sir, where were you born?
In Zoppot, Free State of Danzig at that time.
And what's the name of the town?
Zoppot, Z-O-P-P-O-T, which is now in Poland after the war.
And when's your birthday?
February 19, 1920.
Who was your father?
Paul Togert.
And your mother?
Gertrude Togert. They're both deceased by now.
Yeah. What was your mother's maiden name?
Rumschik. That is R-U-M-S-C-H-I-C-K.
Were your parents both from the Danzig area?
Both, yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
okay. What type of work did father do?
My father was, this get into, might be a little complicated. When I was born, in World War I, he was at the submarine, I believe, U-159. And he was one of the submarines that was along the coast of New York in World War I. If you're interested, the story was a crazy idea of his captain. Let's boys go to America, you know. Okay, hooray, so they did. But they ran on diesel fuel. And on the way back, they did a lot of damage in front of New York Harbor. They torpedoed ships that came out and so forth. And they ran into problems too by being bombarded with depth charges from airplanes. As a matter of fact, I found newspaper reports from that time at the OU at the college. My son found it for me, and it says what my dad told us. However, they seem to believe that there were several submarines, and there was just one. And according to what my father knew, the only one that ever made it. However, according to the newspaper reports, U-boats have been sighted at the same time in other areas along the coast. And they may never came back. And my U-159 wouldn't have come back because half the way back they ran out of diesel fuel and they were just laying in the ocean. And luckily, I believe a Swedish freighter came by loaded with diesel fuel, and they gave them the fuel to get home. They made it home, and when they came home they thought they were going to be heroes, and you know, communication was not in those days like now. They came home, and Germany was a revolution. The communists had taken over. So that was the end of the war for him. And then he worked as a croupier. I don't know if that is the same word in English, croupier in a casino, dealing cards and running the roulette, stuff like that. Somewhere until around 1925, and there was a strike, and he went on strike, and all the ones that went on strike got fired later. And he went in Danzig, in the harbor, as what they call it harbor master, but it's not the master over the entire harbor. That's the master over a certain area, deciding which ship get loaded first, which one get unloaded first, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And he worked there until, I believe, somewhat 1928, and then the depression was gotten in Germany as well as in Danzig, so deep that he was out of work for a while, and then by accident he ran into his old captain, which was not originally from Danzig, and this captain was in charge of the harbor police there somewhere, and he got a job there, so he did good. Then the Danzig I like to mention that it's a controversy today. Um, it is Poland, and accepted as such. And I see pictures and maps in a dictionary where it always was Poland, and it was not. And there are, according to the dictionary, the Russian, the Austrians, and the Prussians invaded somewhere in 1700 something. They invaded Poland, divided it, and Russia took Danzig. According to this, to the history, I learned in school that Danzig was nothing. It was just prairie and woods, and along the coast somewhere, where later the port was developed, there, according to my teachers, history teachers, I'm talking in terms of fourth grader now, fourth and fifth grader. There were about 6 or 8 clay houses, and there lived a few Polish fishermen there. And King Svanderpolk, and this is important, King Svanderpolk is not mentioned in any dictionary whatsoever, and I don't know why. Because he must have existed. The history we were taught in those days could not have been all a lie, you know. And King Svanderpolk saw the Prussians building tremendous cities in those days, modern style, what was considered modern then. And King Svanderpolk was a good-hearted man, and he said to the Prussian king, which I don't know it was at that time, listen, I got a piece of land laying there that isn't worth a dime. If you want it and want to make it prosper and build it up, it's yours. They signed a treaty and gave it to the Prussians. Now this is old German history. And they did build a beautiful city out there. As a matter of fact, I have some pictures later. If you wish, you can look at it. And built the port on the Vesela River, which is about 4 miles south of the Baltic Sea. That's where they built the port, and of course it gotten prosperous. King Svanderpolk died, and after so long, the new king came and said, hey, it's my land. I don't care what Svanderpolk gave you, it's my land. And there started the fighting back and forth among the knights. The Polish knights, Teutonic knights, the Prussian knights, and from then on, it was always a fight over Danzig.
What time period is this? What year?
I think it's a 700 something. I could look it up in a dictionary. 700. All right, I believe somewhere around 713, but I'm not sure. 1700. I'm sorry, 1713, where the fighting around that began, and so the Prussians won, but the Teutonic Knights got wiped out by the Polish Knights. They never recovered. That was, I guess, the Teutonic Knights. Where from? Oh God, no! That must have been earlier than that. Not 1700. No way. The Teutonic Knights ruled from 900 to 1400. This must have been around 1500, I believe. So I could be wrong with it's not exact. That's what I remember. And the Teutonic Knights ruled all the way, had great influence to even to Asia. And we were taught that the Teutonic Knights was a bunch of rough knights, but merciless. Burned everything down and killed everything that came in their way. And the Pope, I don't know which one, this is just what I remember from our history, thought, hold it, these guys make good crusaders. He talked them in to go on his side, but to change their attitude about their brutality. Told them, when you won the battle, you take care of the wounded, you heal them, and so on, and they went along with it, and through the hundreds of years, they became noble knights, but very, very tough. And they lost their battle against the Polish Knights for the first time that they really lost and never recovered since then. That's what I remember. So, now which is true, whether King Swanepoel, I can't find him in no dictionary. Not on the Kings, not on the Swanepoel, not on the Poland.
Now, what country was he ruler of?
Swanepoel,
Yeah.
Poland.
Poland.
Hmm. So the land originally was Polish territory. But after it was built up and was prosperous, they wanted it back, so it had become Prussian, and later then Prussia developed them to become Germany. So then after all that, and of course I was born in 1920, learned all this, and Danzig was, in my estimate, not Polish whatsoever. It was all German. We had some Polish people living in Danzig, and I would not believe that that would be more than 2% of the population, because it was right on the Polish border, and people came over, settled there. And, so I don't think that Poland's justifying really had legal rights of that territory anymore. However, that's my belief. In 1932, Adolf Hitler got big, came. And of course, in Germany, like in Danzig, see, we were considered citizens of the Free State of Danzig. We were not considered German, even so we looked ourselves as Germans, and in Germany, when we went to Germany, we did not have any, we were not different, we were considered Germans. On paper, we were citizens of the Free State of Danzig. So, but the problem was, there was, since World War I rulings, see, Germany was divided after World War I for the first time, between East Prussia and West Prussia. And in the middle was the Polish corridor, called. And Danzig was on one side, to an extent, bordered on East Prussia, but then the rest surrounded by Poland. Now, when we wanted to go to Germany, to Berlin, or anywhere, travel or what, we had to go by train. That was most transportation in those days, through that Polish corridor. And it was known that whenever you did that, the Polish customers, you came to the border, the train would stop, they came inside, opened that suitcase, looking for things you shouldn't take along. But what they did, they, what's the right word now, aggravated, just to show what they can do, took everything out of the suitcase and threw it around. And this is not made out. Many people that want to that have told us that, you know. Throw it in the dirt, you know. Okay, one out, you could park it again, you know. You gone out of the corridor, the same thing happened again, on the way back again. So there was aggravation on both sides, you know. There was a sort of a hatred there that was unnecessary on both sides. See, there was Poland demanded Danzig after World War I, and the Allies, for some reason, did not want along with it. They said, okay, if it is not Germany and it is not Poland, nobody gets it, they're going to be their own country. We had our own government. On the principles of the United States government, we had a president, a vice president, we had the parties, we had a Senate and a Congress, of course, in small. But we had a total free government. Poland did had access to the port in Danzig, but it was very, very little, very small. It was called the Westerplatte. And what we did not know, that the Polish used that Westerplatte to make a fortress out of it.
Now, what do you call it?
Westerplatte.
And what is that?
That is a part in the harbor, and they built a fortress in there with solid artillery and all that, which we at the time never realized until Hitler came. and the railroad was under Polish control, but that was barely noticeable. People that worked there were Germans and all that, but Poland had the right to own that railroad. So that's all I knew about that. So when Hitler came, after a depression in Germany since 1918 until 1932.
Did that depression affect you all?
Oh, yeah, it's very severe, yeah. It did. We did live better than in Germany directly because of that port. There was international travel going on, and a lot of people worked there, and it was prosperous for us. But it did affected us. It started for us really badly, 26, 28, as far as I remember. And of course, after living in poverty practical for all these years, and France and Great Britain put pressure on Germany, which included us in a way too, and Poland put pressure on. It was, for instance, that the Frenchmen, see, you hear today, yeah, Hitler did this, Hitler did that, but the French did for over 10 years or longer. They would say by Versailles Treaty they had the right. We want 30,000 telephone poles manufactured in Germany and delivered by such and such a date. And they had to do it and didn't get paid for it. Germany had to pay for that. And President Wilson was the man that after so many years said, hold it, this is enough. They have suffered enough. Lay off of them. Everybody did, but the French didn't. They kept on up the pressure. Of course, when Hitler came and said, let's whip the French, the people said, great, you know. Naturally, it's a natural procedure. So Hitler came in 1932 and promised that within 4 years, nobody would be without a good paying job unless he was too lazy to work. Now, these things had been promised since 1918 by different governments that collapsed and so on. Everybody promised, and nobody kept. Nothing's gotten worse. And Hitler, it didn't take him 4 years.
Why was he different? Why? What methods did he use that the others didn't?
Well, first of all, he created work by building. He started right away with the Autobahn in Germany. You're familiar with that, right? Which in those days, not having the machinery we have today, was an enormous amount of manpower used all across Germany.
Where did the Autobahn start? Where was the first Autobahn built?
I don't know where they started. I think I was too young to realize that. But that Autobahn was built so that it lasts forever and it's still good. They don't have no potholes in there. I drove over it when I was there in 1983.
I drove it in January. It's good.
On the building that all across in Germany on the Autobahn, you could travel practically to anywhere in Germany, small town, big town, you always got there. It was a tremendous design, and that put people to work.
Where did he get the financial backing?
That I don't know. I guess he somehow created that. I have no idea where the financial backing came from. And he started and then he separated himself from the Versailles Geneva Conference, because he said, I had nothing to do with that. I didn't sign no contract with nobody. The heck with the Frenchmen. And then he said, I believe in 1930, if I'm not mistaken, it was already in 1936, maybe sooner. Frenchmen still had the Saar, which is original German territory, but there were the coal mines and all that, occupied. And he told them, my army's coming tomorrow, and I'll take it back, and you better leave. And they did. Well, the people said, hooray, look what he did. The people in the Saar said, good, we are not no more under pressure from the French occupation. in my book, the way I saw it, the problem began after the first 4 years. He had, during that time, built up a tremendous, what they called security force with with certain parts of the SS. See, there was so much different. When you say SS, it's a bad word. But there were so many different SS. There was what they call the Sicherheitspolizei. That was SS, which means security police. And they were dangerous. And he had that built up so strong that when you, after the first 4 years, would have said, well, I don't know about Adolf Hitler, it doesn't look so good to me, bingo, you was gone, if the wrong man had it. And it became dangerous to live in a way, as long as you agreed with everything Hitler or the party said and did, you didn't have it bad. But the moment you disagreed, and that could be just a minor thing, I know of people that made a remark in a saloon, a stranger, somebody comes up and says, hey, what do you think about Hitler's speech yesterday, you know? And somebody would say, well, it's all right, but, you know, I disagree with one thing, he said. That man was gone if he had talked to the wrong guy. It came to the point that you couldn't trust no one. Then you had in Germany people, the way I look at it, of course, this is my opinion. You had many people in Germany that were nobodies, not even well educated, but being such a strong, good party members, they became somebody all of a sudden. And they would put the finger on you in a hurry, you know, and you was gone. I have heard American soldiers telling me shortly after the war, is this interesting, or you want to ask other questions?
No, this is.
I had American soldiers saying, how come that the German people let a man like Hitler get that big? Well, this explains it. He got the people out of depression. He was the first one who kept his word for the people. But the people did not realize that he built in the background a security staff that they couldn't make a wrong move no more after that. They had, for instance, when was the second election? Let's see, 1933, 4, 5, 6, 7, I believe in 1937, 36 or 37, and there was no opponent, naturally. Nobody could beat what he had done.
Now,
Hindenburg was the president of Germany when Hitler came into power. See, in Germany, the chancellor is the man that rules the country. The president is just a figure. And Hindenburg was in favor of Hitler. He was strongly against him in the beginning, but when Hindenburg saw the stormtroopers, it was like a military outfit, drilled, perfect, with music bands and everything, like a strong army without arms, because by Geneva Conference, Germany could not have any more than 100,000 men soldiers, an army of 100,000 men. And that wasn't much. And building up the stormtroopers, and Hindenburg saw them marching, he thought that's the man for Germany, because Hindenburg was hateful to the Allies for what they did after World War I. He gotten old, and he was in favor of Hitler. That is, according to what we knew in Germany. I read books, or I have seen movies where that was not so. But I read a book called The Reichsmarschall that was written by I don't know the name anymore, but it was written by an English or British press secretary that was press secretary in Berlin during the Nazi time. Now this man will know, and he would not lie in favor of the Germans. If that would have been written by a German, I would say, well, maybe, you know. But it was written by that man, and he said himself that Hindenburg has made a statement at one time before Hitler came into power. If I would have known that that man is able to build an army like that, he would have been my chancellor a long time ago. And of course that made Hitler win in the election too, that favor. And when the second election came, that's when the shock came. Very few people voted against it. Hitler said, okay, no opponent, we're still going to have election, just I want Adolf Hitler, yes or no. If you don't want me, vote no, I step down. Find yourself somebody else. Very few old hardened communists, see, before Hitler came into power, it was a choice. If Hitler wouldn't have made it, the Communist Party would have made it at that time. And that was the lesser evil, was Hitler. So some of these people voted against Hitler, and how, I could not explain and I can't figure out. These people had no windows in the house next morning because the stormtroopers went along and threw bricks in the windows. They were all marked, and how they ever found out, I don't know. Everybody wanted a ballot box, like always before, but they must have had the people they suspected would vote no, this ballots somehow marked or what they handed them. I cannot explain it. And that's when people, even people very much in favor, said, hey, now this is not right. You know, he said, vote no if you don't want me. Some people didn't want him. And they got cautious. Right there, that was the first slowly step back from Adolf Hitler, but there was no way of doing it. You could just whisper it, you know. Then the second blow was the Crystal Night. I don't know if that means anything to you, the Crystal Night in Germany, called the Crystal Night. See, before Hitler, between the two, between the time end of World War I and Adolf Hitler, Germany was very, very strongly occupied by Jews. Jews moved in from all over, from anywhere. And the Jews, they were the ones that had the businesses and were rich. Now, that is from the way I look at it today, the German people hated that, and therefore were not in big favor of Jews. I look at it personally today different. In those days I was a kid and didn't really know what was going on. The Jews all over the world are good in business. They were good in business in the time before Christ, okay? Now I cannot blame a man for being smarter than I am. That was wrong, I think. Even so, at that time, I didn't look at it that way. Well, was a Jew. Everybody was against Jews, you know. But I had a lot of Jewish friends, and I personally must admit that if you have a Jew for a friend and have convinced him that you truly are his friend, he goes to hell and back for you. I have experienced that 3-4 times in my life, and even after the war. Jews, okay, basically I believe wherever you go, and I've been quite a bit around, what nationality or religion or race, you're going to find good ones and bad ones anywhere, right? But among Jews, I found only good ones, person to person. I could give you examples, but that would drag it out. So just this is the basic thing. So during the Crystal, so the Jews were down to zero anyway in Germany through all that. And I also do understand that, see, Hitler was not a paper hanger. That was Patton's expression. And he was not a painter painting houses. Hitler wanted to become an artist. and he was pretty good. Now, I have done artistic work, especially with pencil, beautiful pictures and all that, but that doesn't make me an artist. And I think that's what Hitler was. And he thought in his younger days, he went to college. His colleagues were mostly Jews. His professors were Jews. Okay, his colleagues passed, he flunked. But he didn't blame it on not being good enough, he blamed it on the Jews. Because he was not a Jew, that's why he flunked, which was not so. But I think he was convinced about that. And he had hate for the Jews from then on. And that was one way to get even with the Jews. That was one way. Because what I don't understand, if he didn't want the Jews in Germany, he could have simply run them out of Germany, okay? But when it came to the point that they wanted to go out, wanted to leave, he closed the borders. He didn't let them out. He had them killed. And that's where it's wrong. If he would have said, I don't want no Jews in Germany, or you're liable to get killed, they would have taken off, would have gone somewhere else. And that's what I despise. So then came the Crystal Night, and I believe that was in 1937 or 38.
How do you spell that?
Crystal Night, like crystal, like crystal glass. Like crystal you buy in glass. Crystal Night. Where the name came from, I don't know. I had it the first time in America. But I guess they called it in Germany, and I may have forgotten it because I was very young, the Kristallnacht, which is the same thing. During this night, somehow, somebody had it organized from the high party leaders that stormtroopers wander out wherever Jews live, broke their windows, threw their furniture through the window, whipped the Jews, run them out in the street, and just nothing but damage. And that took place all over Germany. Nobody heard about it in the evening. Everybody knew it in the morning. It was that secretly organized. And here again, I understand that Goering found that out after it happened too. Said, that's stupid. He said, all these Jews, especially the businesses, they all have insurance. They all have good money. Who's paying for it is the German insurance company. You know? But they just, I guess they wanted to break the moral of the Jews, make him nothing worth more than dirt and all that. And after that night, many, many, many people said, man, this is going too far, you know. But again, you better didn't say it loud out. I have been made statements during the war that I got into very deep hard water. And we get to that later. Well, why not? For instance, I was in the last 3 years of the war in a storm battalion. There was a troubleshooter battalion, OB Southwest, that means Oberbefehlshaber Südwest, which means top command of the Southwest. And this battalion was given to that field marshal or general, whoever was in charge of the southern and western fronts. And he would put us, he was the only one to say where to put us. There was somewhere they couldn't hold the front line no more, the enemy broke through, send us up, straighten it out, come back out. And of course we had very heavy losses all the time. And the time came then that we didn't get replacements from Germany the way we needed it. We got either young kids with not enough experience or training, or men with 40 years old. What you do with a 40-year-old man in a storm battalion, in a battlefield, he runs out of breath. And so very unqualified people, except the old ones, were the ones, and it usually amounted to that the old ones, even so, we became less and less, came back, and the young ones were dead, and then we got new ones again. And I had realized, I was platoon leader in those days, non-commissioned officer as a sergeant. And every time we got new ones from Germany, I would say, who of the new ones think that we're going to win the war? Because I knew we had it lost. Everybody, they were filled up with propaganda. And we were old soldiers. I was a soldier for almost 6 years, a war soldier, starting in Poland. And I would tell them, now listen, boys, I'm going to be your leader. We have lost that war. Now, who thinks we're going to lose the war? The old ones, I said, so that's where we stand now. If we get out there and you do exactly as I tell you, you might live until the end comes. But if you want to go by what you got told at home and play hero, unnecessary hero, you will not be back. And I was at one time, it was always accepted, and at one time I was reported by a young soldier that had come from Germany, and he got killed the first day in battle, anyway. And I was called to the battalion chief, and the major said, Togert, have you made that remark? I said, yeah. I said, do you believe we win the war? And he said, man, it doesn't matter what we believe, you or I. He said, do you know that if I let this go on, now where it should go, you are in front of a firing squad? Well, I knew that, but I did not expect that anyone doing that to me, And he said, I tell you what, he said, I have been had you a long time, you're a good platoon leader, and it's not going to go any farther. But one more time, I haven't got no choice. He said, so think before you talk. I said, well, he said, why are you doing it? I said, look, when I go out with these kids there, I'm responsible to an extent for their life. And I want them to know what the score is. I want to be honest with him. He said, forget it. You don't make any remarks on what you believe. Believe what you want, but keep your mouth shut, okay? And there was one case where I was close, very close into trouble. I don't want to go into how the boy got killed, but he got killed only because he didn't do what I said. I said, don't do it. He had to do it anyway, and it killed him. And there have been several occasions earlier than that I had one problem. I had a big mouth. and sort of like, I didn't thought, well, I better don't say this, or I can say that. I always did like to say it how it is. And that was my problem. The first time I realized keep my mouth shut was in the early stages of war when we came back from France, when we had invaded France in 1940. And I was sitting with my dad in a bar, and he said, Karl, that war is beginning to get on your nerve, don't it? I said, no, I'm not nervous. He said, no. He said, you're constantly putting the ashes off your cigarette and it isn't lead. He said, you're not nervous. I said, well, one thing, I said, I want to tell you. I said to my dad, all my life in school from childhood on, I've been taught that the French are our most bitter enemies we have. I said, and damn it, I was over there fighting them, and when it was over with and I got to mingle with the people, I couldn't find no enemies. And my dad, he looked down, he said, shh. He said, hey, you're beginning to think, but think. Don't say things like that. Already that would have been dangerous for me to say if the wrong man heard it. So you have an approximately idea.
Just a second. I'm having a...
So, okay, this gives you a basic idea how the individual felt. Now, when it came to the war in Danzig, we didn't. I guess that covers pretty well the psychological idea of the people on what developed. I was naturally in the Hitler Youth.
I was going to ask. The organization of the Hitler Youth.
Yeah, I joined in 1933 because there was not a boy in Germany that was not in the Hitler Youth, and if you wasn't, they probably beat you up in school. But that's not why I joined. I liked it. I wanted to belong to the crowd. I wanted to have a uniform like all the other kids. Now, I'm not trying to cover up and say I probably would have beaten up. I would have, if I would have directly resisted, said, no, I'm going to join that, you know. But that was not why I joined. I joined, especially kids, you see, all of a sudden having a nice uniform, marching disciplined with a little flag and stuff like that. But it was that was not the Hitler. The Hitler Youth was actually considered the age between 16 and 18, and the ones below, no, was it, 16 and 18, and the ones below that age, they were called young folk, which means young people, young people's organization. But it was the beginning. It was a Hitler Youth organization, but actually for the younger kids. And I loved horses, but I could not afford the sport because the sport is expensive. And I didn't know how to ride because there was near where I grew up thoroughbred racing horses. And I had ridden already horses as a kid. And while I was in this youth group, they gave us an opportunity to go to official horseback riding school and ride for free. Whoever qualified. Of course, I felt I qualified, and I did. And when I became 16, I was good, and I was riding already in youth tournaments. Now came the point. I was supposed to go into the older group of the Hitler Youth, with 16, and I thought, no, I don't want to ride with these kids. I feel I am better. And one day I saw the stormtroopers had a riding brigade, but they were mainly considered with riding on going on tournaments, even international tournaments, jumping, horse racing, stuff like that. And that's where I wanted to belong. But I had to be 18 for that. On one day I saw what they call the Standartenführer, which would be in the army the rank of a colonel. I saw him in the stables, and I was riding in that Hitler uniform. I was 16, and I walked up to him, straight up, and that took a lot of guts, you know. And I told him flat, I stood in attention and said, I'm ready to get into the other group of Hitler Youth, and I feel I'm better than they are, and I like to be riding for the stormtroopers. And he looked at me, he said, son, with that age, I don't think I can manage it, but let me look into it. And a week later, they had our group riding, and he came there. And he set up a jump, and they gave me the toughest horse to handle. And he said, without a saddle, just a blanket on and the goat around. He said, jump over there. I jumped it. He said, make it higher. I jumped it again 3-4 times. He says, that boy is belonging to stormtroopers. Now, I was a stormtrooper within a week. And I rode tournaments, I rode horse races, and it made me big. I got the, what you call the Reiterabzeichen, that was a medal that you had to make through tests. And I made it with very, very high grades, then already. But for that I had to wait until I was 18. I could make the youth medal And I said, no, I want the man's medal. I had to wait to 18. I was 18 in February, and in March or April I made that medal through a special test.
What did you have to? What type of test was it?
It was dress riding, on very, very strong particular. Jumping, and one theoretical class, a test. I made, but the way they judged, they started with 0. 0 was the best. Nobody ever made 0. If you made 1.5, you was darn good. And would you believe it? I made dress riding with 1.5. I made jumping with 0.8. Because they didn't want 0, 1, 2, 3. They want 0, 0.1, 0.2. That particular. And I made jumping with 0.8. That was the best. And I was a good jumper in those days.
Was this about the time of the Olympics in Berlin?
Yeah. Let's see. The Olympics were in 36, yeah. That was about that time. But I was then not knowing on a tournament place. I just had started becoming a stormtrooper. But what I did not know, this bogus to get me into the stormtroopers there, to the high command in Berlin, they had to file applications. I didn't need to file an application in writing. They took care of that. They forged my age, my date of birth, to make it looking like I was 18 so I wouldn't be turned down in Berlin. They wanted me for the glory of the stormtroopers winning tournaments. That I found out after the war. The Allies had the Nazi files, you know. And I was called to headquarters in Munich and was interviewed at that time. And the guy always would hammer, what was your date of birth? And he would ask 1,000 different questions. And he would say, what's your age? And it bothered me. And I had a feeling they don't believe my age, you know. And so all of the certain light came in my head. I said, you question my age, I know it. No, not really. I said, yes, I know it. Just tell me why. Maybe I have an explanation. No, he said, no, there's nothing wrong with your age. And that came to me. I said, I will tell you something. When I joined the stormtroopers, I was 16. Look at your file and see what it says. He said, you're right, it says 18. I said, that's why. They could not have gotten me to ride the horses if I wouldn't have been 18. They made that one change, and that almost got me in trouble. Okay, I was with the stormtroopers and rode the tournaments. Now in Danzig, as I said before, we could not have an army. But we did had one regiment.
Okay, now this still the Free State of Danzig?
It's still the Free State of Danzig.
You did not have an army?
No,
Why?
Before the war. That was against the treaty in Versailles.
So you were still under the Versailles Treaty in Danzig?
Right. But we had an army. We faked it. We had the stormtroopers, naturally, which was volunteer thing, and that was not much army. It was military-like, but no weapons. They had a few carbines and did some exercises on Sunday afternoon, like the National Guard here and there. But the army we had, they called it Landespolizei, which means land police. And there was one regiment. The uniform was like the regular police uniform, but they had their steel helmets and everything else like a regular army would have, one regiment, and that was permitted. See, we had to watch the Poles. The Poles had the right to move in and take over if we became a so-called dangerous substance, you know. And in 1939, I was, like I said, riding tournaments and so forth. In 1939, I believe it was in June or July, when they built up a second regiment. And it sort of, by rumor, looked like war is coming up. And I thought, hey, if war comes up and I volunteer now, I can pick what I want. I did and said cavalry, because I loved horses. And my dream actually was always, I did not really thought there will be a war, but it looked like it. It could go one way or the other. I wanted to become an officer in the cavalry and then work myself into the Academy Hanover, Cavalry Academy. And from there, you could real easily, as a good horseback rider, become a lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain, major in the hurry. But all you did, you traveled and rode tournaments for the German cavalry. And that was my goal. On the other hand, I thought, if that works out fine, if war comes, I am where I want to be. And I did. So I got in the cavalry. We didn't call it cavalry at that point. We called it infantry riding platoons. And they had special missions like advanced patrols, reconnaissance patrols, and then being the tip of the infantry, advanced cavalry.
Did you have weapons at that time?
Oh yes, we did have weapons. Weapons got shipped in from Germany, and I'm just getting to that.
Yeah, okay.
And while this regiment was built up, they announced in Danzig a big contest in sports between Danzig and Germany, and it would be a contest, a small Olympic. It was all organized and fine. Then came German ships in on board the sportsmen. The sportsmen were SS troops. They came in civilian clothes, they unloaded the ships, there were guns on the ships, which I myself at that time didn't realize. But they went to the to the tournament halls in Danzig, changed clothes, and they didn't, that was SS, but they called themselves Heimwehr, that means home protection, sort like a militia. And then they started asking in Danzig for volunteers to join that. Now, first of all, I already was in the army, in the cavalry, so I was obsolete to that. But a lot of them did, not knowing that they're going to go into the Waffen-SS. All right, the day came, it blasted off, the war with Poland was there, September 1st, and we were told, and I believe that it was truthful, except for the political part, how it was done, that Hitler had given Poland, and first of all, he had made advances toward having one highway through the Polish corridor, like the Autobahn, which would be considered German territory, between Danzig and Germany, and connect these two countries. And one railroad like that. The Poles refused. Naturally. I see their point why they refused. So they would have then have Hitler officially along their border, right there. And he gave them 48 hours. They didn't answer, boom, the war was there. But the war was already prepared because, again, my opinion, Hitler knew damn well that the Poles would not go along with that, you know. So the war broke loose. We went into Poland, and I personally, as a Danziger and German native, felt it was justified.
What did you do on that day?
Well, we wanted to roll across the border and started fighting. That was it. We rode across the border I guess 3 days later, really, we were in Danzig, and we were out in a little town somewhere, ready to go when the war started. And we got up in the morning to feed the horses, and in Danzig, in the harbor in Danzig, was a German battleship, and I don't know no more which one that was. A big German battleship, which had come for a visit. That was all set up because a German battleship came to the port into Danzig almost once a year. They came in and people could go and visit it and open house and what have you, you know. That was nothing unusual. But what it was sitting in there to shoot to Poland, because Poland was just about 8 miles away from there. And they started firing. And my friend said, hey, whenever a big shot went on the ship, you know, I guess it was before 5, probably 4:30 in the morning, they would fire a 12-gun salute or stuff like that. And my friend said, some big shot is visiting the ship. I said, hey, not 4:30 in the morning, something stinks. This is real. And sure enough, about 5 minutes later, we all were called together and said declaration of war. The radio was turned on, Hitler made a short speech, and all we waited now for our orders, and I guess 2 or 3 later, we the food was amazingly short, and it couldn't be right. So I don't ever know what became out of it, what happened to them, because in the German army you don't ask questions, you just follow orders. You can if you have something good, and I was in a position as company sergeant to blow it. I was in a position of that, but I didn't know, when I started blowing it, I didn't know that major was involved. So
So from France, and you're transferred.
okay, I was still, that unit was in France also. That was stationed at La Ciotat in, I don't know how you pronounce it, La Ciotat or La Ciotat. That was on the Mediterranean coast, somewhere, I believe it's north of, no, it's right near Marseille. Near Marseille, on the coast, and there the begin was nothing but, well, when troops never been in battle, they had nothing but training and stuff like that. But it was set up on the coast in order to be protection against any invasion that could take place from the Allies, but it was not expected at that time, it was just a precaution. And on drills in between, then we gotten further and further south. Then we got shifted to, now, Strong Battalion OB Southwest means we could have been today in France, tomorrow in Italy, tomorrow in France again, tomorrow maybe in Spain. We've been all the way down to the border of Spain at one occasion. The commander who was for a while was Ramel, our main chief, was then on the end Kesselring.
Did you meet Rommel?
No, but I met Kesselring.
You did?
Himself, yeah. And that was very interesting. Remind me of it when we get to that. So we were shifted around because wherever that commander thought he might gonna need us in the nearest future, that's where we were nearby, you know. And then we ended up in northern Italy, and then we were farther south, and then it came. Whenever we're not shifted back to France anymore, because I guess we were more concentrated in Italy, and then came Anzio.
Aware of the invasion of Sicily? Had you been informed?
Oh yeah, we were aware of that. See, after Sicily came Monte Cassino, and we were on the way down to Monte Cassino, and we were called back because the battle was already lost by the time we could arrive. We were very close to there, but it was already lost. And then we got thrown in at Anzio a few times.
Tell me about Anzio.
Well, there really isn't much to tell except that that was the toughest battle I have seen in the entire war. Anzio was something, there was a miscalculation. And it was not a miscalculation. I read later in the book that general at Anzio, that invaded Anzio, wrote a book, and I guess it's called just Battle of Anzio. Somebody gave it to me. And that cleared my thoughts up. Our troops in Italy were very, very weak already at that time. See, France was already invaded. We just got offered all the resistance we possibly could down there. And, of course, to our intelligence, we knew they were going to invade at Anzio. And what they did at Anzio, a couple of nights before the invasion, they knew exactly when they were going to invade. The ships were already out in the ocean. We could see them. We pulled out of Anzio, just went back in the hills, and they bombarded Anzio from the ships with artillery all night long. They fired at historical things, for instance, the castle where Nero played the fiddle when he burned Rome down, destroyed. Everything destroyed. And in the morning they attacked, but nobody was there. That was a trick we pulled. But before we get any further, if they would have invaded just 30 miles further north, there was nothing. There was not a German soldier inside. We didn't have no backup. We had everything concentrated on Anzio because that's where they're going to come. And we didn't have much troops then anymore down there in Italy. So if they would have invaded 30 miles north, go to Rome, and forget about us, we starved to death. We had to give up. They didn't do it. I read later in the general's book why. Because Churchill said so. He knew, the general knew there was nothing up there, and he begged Congress by telegrams, let me invade 30 miles further up. Churchill said, I want Anzio. Why? Nobody knows. And that's what came to the big battle of Anzio. So they claimed they would take Anzio within 3 weeks. And it took them, I guess, 6 months. It was not that simple because we weren't very many no more. But the German army was still pretty good, you know. So we went in the hills, and when they came into Anzio in the morning, attacked, nobody did. They said, boy, this is a piece of cake. You know, that's the way they felt from what I later read and saw on movies. And we let them in, and we let them build a bridgehead. You know what that means. Okay. Now, what they're going to do, there is no enemy, they're going to have to find them, right? We had out in the hills, set up tanks on every tank. When I say we, I'm not talking about my battalion, I'm talking about that division that was there. And made bushes out of it, you know, set up loudspeakers for when they come, and that was also set up when they come, they have to come in the open field. And they send out heavy reconnaissance patrols up to sometimes company strength just to find an enemy. And all of a sudden, a loudspeaker said, hold it right there. You're surrounded. You may give up, will be treated by the rules of the Geneva Conference, or you all will die. They decided to shoot. Well, the bush fell apart when the tank started rolling on one, you know. That went along all over the front, and then they pushed them back, and then the battle in Anzio really started in the rubble. And that is when they sent us down the first time. And then they pulled us out. We had so much heavy losses. We weren't worth a dime no more. They pulled us back out. They replaced the loss with the new man, and they sent us in again. And then the last time they sent us down, that was in late June. And then the battle had advanced already out of Anzio into Albano. And in the Albana hills, they call it, those are hills, they are just hills, and nothing but dry grass about that high. Here and there a bush, here and there a strip of woods, but nothing much, nothing really to hide. And we held the Albana hills, and here is a controversy. I saw the movie when the American army marched into Rome, I believe that said on July the 3rd. On July the 4th, I saw the heaviest battle ever in the Albano Hills, which is about 35 miles south of Rome. And we were fighting like the devil, and they beat us like the devil. I went in with a platoon. It just happened that night I went in after dark in the front line, and with 32 or 33 men, and I came out the next day with myself and 5.
What happened?
We got wiped out, totally wiped out. About as soon as dawn came, the sun came up, everything was quiet. Artillery fire broke out together with mortar fire, heavy machine gun fire, everything they had, they threw at us. And we could do nothing but hide and run. And on certain parts we held, and I worked myself back to the battalion command, and the battalion command was some, I better say, don't say that on tape, some captain that was running the battalion, and he wanted to become his major, and he had all the answers, and the artillery was firing, I believe, for 3 hours. It was, but like a drum. There was not, you could look wherever you wanted. There was not a place. The fields were like plowed, you know, and we made it back to there. And he said he had sent out so many messengers, and none of them came back. Well, no wonder. He said, but you made it back to here. You're going to make it back up front, go on the left flank. I haven't heard nothing from there, and there's an infantry company and Lieutenant so-and-so, and find out how they can hold out. I made it. I went back in the left flank. But that lieutenant said, how in the hell did you get here alive, you know? I made it back alive. And then he said, okay, you're doing fine. Now you go out in the right flank, find out what's going on there. And I said, no. That was the first time in the war that I refused an order. He said, you said what? I said no, because I can't anymore. I can't. I'm out of breath. Every bone is hurting. And I know if I go out there, I don't come back anyway. You won't get no message. He threw a pistol at me. And his aide, which was a first lieutenant, went in between him and me, and he said, look, Captain, that man is wore out. He needs some rest. And he put his pistol away, but he was mad and hurt me. He said, all right, we'll put you to sleep. It was a big, solid bunker, you know, and the artillery was still hammering. And he took me out. I hadn't slept all night anyway. This must have been somewhere around noon by that time. And then all my losses and all that, I was down. My nerves were shot. I thought, I don't give a hoot whether he shoot me or not. That first lieutenant, he took me in another room in the bunker, and there was a cot. He said, lay down. He said, anything you want? I said, yeah, a bottle of booze if you got one. He said, I got one. And he brought it. I drank about half of that booger. I don't know how long it took me. It didn't take me long. And passed out and slept on that cot. And when he woke me up, it must have been somewhere around 5, 6 o'clock in the evening. He said, hey, things have quieted down and we need you now again. I said, all right. Then they sent me out to what they called Fernbeobachter. That's a guy between two front lines. And he got a binoculars, but it's not like binoculars. It comes out like this, out the ground, like this, and it got a prisma. And when you look in underneath, you don't have to stick your head up, and you can see what's going on.
Periscope.
Periscope, right. And he said, I got a periscope out there on 3 men, and they had a telephone line out there, and they also had a teletype connection, or was it radio? I'm not sure. And he said, and I don't get no answers from there. Get out there and find out whether they are alive or what, you know. So I took 2 of my men, and we sneaked out there, and we saw the American tanks already rolling out. But it was just before sundown. And we crawled and we hollered every once in a while, everywhere dead guys laying around, until we got an answer, yeah, over here, and we jumped in the hole. And that sergeant was sitting there, and his 3 men, and they were done. He said, telephone line is out, that radio, or was it teletype? I think it was a radio. It's out. What's going on? He said, I'm scared to crawl out of here, because look in here. So I looked in that telescope, and man, they brought infantry behind tanks. The tanks came up, infantry hiding behind tanks. The infantry split out, the tanks moved back, and we knew they were going to come, you know. We decided, shit, we give up. Get a white flag and get out of the hole, you know. That wasn't far to over there. Nothing white, no white handkerchief, not a piece of white paper. Say, the moment, they know we are here. The moment we stick our head out, boom, you know. Up the hand comes first or not, you never knew in that war no more, you know. You don't know who's on the other side. And maybe it's just somebody says, hey, I got another hiney, you know. So we were scared, and while we still been debating, we had a voice holler, was another messenger. The front line is moving back, entire front line, from high command, get out of here. So we sneaked through the high weeds as long as we could, and then we ran like hell to headquarters. And I had one vehicle, see, I went in with 4 2-centimeter cannons and 4 vehicles, and I had 1 vehicle and 1 cannon left. And I got that, and then we went back, and then I went up further northwards, and we went into Rome. Short before Rome, they still thought we're going to have resistance there. They wanted me to dig myself in with what I had left. I didn't even start digging. I said, guys, lay down and sleep. When they come, we want to resist. There's no resistance, you know, it's ridiculous. On the next morning, we moved into Rome, and Rome was then declared an open city. Nobody would fire a shot in there. So that was, we were allowed to be in Rome until sundown. By sundown, we had to be out. And that was a dirty trick. When you go out at night, it's one thing, but if you have to get out of daylight, we saw the planes, the fighter bombers, on the other side of Rome just waiting for us, and there was only one street out where we could go. And I saw an entire division from what was left, lined up down the street outside Rome on fire, every vehicle. And would you believe it, mine didn't burn. I was hidden underneath a viaduct, a very low viaduct. It was about that high, and maybe as wide as from that wall to here. And we duked under there, and the Italian said that used that for for taking a crap every time when they went through there. What that stunk in there, man. But we made it until dark, and when we came out, everything we could see was on fire. Now, some of them weren't, but they had ammunition trucks were on fire. And I said, the hell, get to the left side of the road and drive. We drove through flying bullets, our own bullets. And we made it all the way through, and on the end, all the way up, was a general. And he stood there, and there have been more that had not been hit. They came, and I said, now what? He said, move, soldier, move, north. And I said, how far? He said, as far as you can get. And we took off. We drove all night, and next morning we hit some outfit, supply outfit. And while we got something to eat there and could sleep until late afternoon. And by that time, the order came from here. It's just the story, blah, blah, blah. Came the order, go back south and see to make contact with your troops. And we came back south. Everything was on fire. All the troops were. It was just chaos. There was no command, no more. No. I said, let's go north. And we went north, and we got later connected back with our battalion. What was left, we went north. And then our next battle, after being recuperated and all that, that battalion was in Autobahn no more. That was at Voltri. And that was just I wouldn't even really call it a battle, but we did had heavy losses on both sides, but it was just a piece of cake in what we had seen south of Rome. And from there we got again refilled, and then I came to Ostilia, and there I got wounded, and from there on the war was over for me.
Where'd you meet Kesselring?
Somewhere in northern Italy, and I don't know exactly what the town's name was. What it amounted to, there was an officers' meeting, and it was partisan area, very strong partisan groups. They're killing around and knocking out soldiers and all that. And Kesselring was coming up there, and there were officers from all over the area, somewhere in northern Italy. There was a movie theater, and Kesselring would address these officers or have a meeting with them in that movie theater, and I was assigned as the sergeant for his safety. And I had my platoon, the whole platoon, I had them spread out, where he's going to come. You have spread out the intersections, you protect that. Overnight, houses around there, we made house checks that there was no guerrilla or the partisans, we call them, assemblies or anything like that. And I was told if anything happened to him, it's going to be my head, So I was on the balls that night, And the next day, when the meeting took place and he finally arrived, I stood at the entrance of the theater, and I had the theater spiked with machine guns on the roof and everywhere. And in the German army, when you have an order and anyone, an officer above your rank comes by, you have to report to him what your orders are, what you have done about it, on where you stand. And here came Kesselring with his big staff, and when I saluted and started talking, my name is Sergeant Togert, and I have the order to, he pat me on the shoulder, and I thought it was really nice. He said, "That's good enough, Sergeant. I know you're doing a good job." And walked down. He wasn't even listening to that, He didn't even let me finish. But it made me feeling good, He didn't know me from Adam, but he made me feeling good by patting my shoulder and saying, "That's good enough, Sergeant. I know you're doing a good job." And they had a meeting, I don't know, maybe 2 hours or so. And that was as close as I met him.
And how were you wounded? What happened?
I was hit by a mortar that flew 1,000 pieces and got me in the shoulder and in the arms. And
where were you? Where this happened?
Ostilia. All I know is the name of the town is Ostilia, and it was on the Po River.
Now, is this in Italy?
In Italy, yeah. The Po River is in Italy. It's just about, I say, in the middle of Italy, between south and north. On the Po River, there's a lot of rice going on and stuff like that. It was very, very bad. Going into details, I don't know whether it matters or not. It's another long story, but I got hit by a mortar. As a matter of fact, two others got hit with me from that same grenade and mortar attack, and we were pretty much in open. And one of them, I know definitely lost both arms, and one of them lost both legs, and I don't know whether they lived or not. I just, when it hit, I passed out. I was laying on my left arm like this, and when it hit, I passed out, and when I woke up, I just heard screaming, and I was laying on my back, and it came to me, hey, I'm alive, and I had a pain in my chest. I felt I was hit in the chest, but I wasn't. I was hit in the shoulder, and that thing was about that big and that wide, went through, past the lung, did not scratch the lung, and was deep in here, and when I breathed, it was hurting. I found it out later. And I wanted to reach for that, and I couldn't lift that arm. Same arm, the same. Couldn't lift my arms, and I lifted my legs, and they worked, and I yelled, and some of my men got me out of there, and this was all full of blood here, and I thought there got to be an injury. There wasn't. But for instance, this one, see, when I felt over, my hands must have gotten like this, and this one was bleeding like a water faucet.
Yeah.
That one, and that caused all the blood down here, And I had one through here, a bunch of flesh ones, but the worst one was the shoulder.
On the back of the shoulder.
The shoulder blade was 1,000 pieces at that time, And I'm lucky I kept my arm. I don't like to take off my shirt and say, look how they hurted me, but it was very severe, and it took a long time to heal up, and I was lucky I kept my arm.
Now, is that where you were taken prisoner or captured?
No, I wasn't captured there. They got me back. They got me out of there and transported me to Verona to a hospital. And damn it, I was laying there in a hospital, it was real nice, and then they started bombing it. The beds flew, my bed tipped over, fell in a bunch of glass, the windows caved in. And but they got me out of there too and got me in the basement. And there I was laying naked all night long, and of course cold, got fever. And then next day by ambulances I was transported back to somewhere northern Italy, and ended finally up in Milan, what they called Merano in those days, and probably call it Merano now. There was a German hospital, and I think I was, on there it was declared that the war was over. And whoever that officer was, a major, a colonel, I don't know, who came from room to room making the announcement, said all we can hope now is that the Americans going to be here sooner than the partisans, because the Italian partisans, they were known for brutal. They probably just would have killed us in there, And the Americans came, and I guess by the next day, and there came an American officer in, spoke very good German, and he said that the war was over and that we should feel to forget what we can, go back home and build up what we can. Those were his words. And he said, you will be taken care of by your own doctors under American doctors' supervision. But then they started right away to build a big barbed wire fence around the hospital, and did put guards on the gates, but it was not. There was no feeling of being tough in prison or anything. It looked to me more like a formality, you know, because the gate. I never saw the gate closed. It always was open because ambulances and stuff went back and forth. People get transferred to other hospitals. There was just always a guard, one guard with a 45 standing on the gate, you know. And when we got close, of course, they were not allowed to talk to us, you know. Sometimes you got a little smile, and he turned around and we walked off again, you know.
Were you in Italy whenever Italy surrendered and joined the Allies?
I think so, but there was not such an official thing until we were totally beat out of Italy. See, the Italians, they were very, very undecided people. We call them the people with the two flags. Now, of course, this is exaggerated, but we said they got an American flag in this pocket and a German flag in this pocket. And when we take the town, they stay on the street, Viva la Germany, you know. And when we get whipped out again, they stay on the street, Viva la America with the other flag, you know. The Italians are known for that, but as a human being, put yourself in their position. What choice did they have?
Right.
You know, they had
damned if you do and damned if you don't.
Right. So I think that's what caused that. It gave them a bad name, at least among the Germans. I even had American soldiers feeling that way,
yeah.
You know. But on the other hand, looking at it from the human standpoint, what choice did they have? Yeah, me too, you do that. My wife is just coming in.
Oh.
But we don't
Oh,
yeah. Then in the after-war time, maybe interesting to know is that, okay, from Meran, when I was healed up well enough, that was in October, I was transported with many others. The ones that were well enough had to go into prison camp, but not really as a prison camp, as a, well, we had to be processed. They processed out which ones are Nazis, which ones can go home, you know. Most of them could go home. And I was, at that time, already joined an entertainment group, which was a 12-man band, and I don't know Werner Fink, whether that means anything to you. Werner Fink was a German comedian of the capacity of Bob Hope, and he had made some remarks in his jokes on stage about Adolf Hitler, and he ended up in a concentration camp at one time, only for a certain period of time, maybe 8 weeks or so. But he was too popular, they couldn't just eliminate him. And then they stuck him in the army, and he was about 50 years old, you know. And in the army, everybody knew Werner Fink. He got a job somewhere with the Signal Corps and somewhere in the way back, hands on the telephone, you know. And he had established an entertainment group for German soldiers in hospitals, as well as for American soldiers in their clubs. And I got into that. Even so, I was not totally healed up. My right arm was still, the shoulder was about that much lower than this shoulder. And they had made some cotton balls and stuff like that. And that arm was hanging like this, that to bring the shoulder up. I got into that entertainment group because I did in Germany before the war and during the war. Since I was 14 years old, I did magic. And I was the MC in this group. But we all got thrown together. We could stay together, but they took us to Germany, Bad Aibling in Bavaria, into a prison camp. God, that was an airport that was made a prison camp out of, and that was very, very solid. Barbed wire, and that was like a big place surrounded by barbed wire. On inside was like cages. And somewhere in the middle you was the, if you wanted to get out there, you might would have had to cut 30 cages before you get to the end, and two jeeps, one this way, constantly around with machine guns, spotlights on the top, and pouring down rain for weeks. It had, and was still raining when we came, mud that deep, and all they had for us was tents. On the tents, they didn't have enough. In a tent for normally 8 men, they stuck 12 in. You can imagine how we slept in that mud, It was terrible. But not because they wanted it that way. It just, everything was going so fast and they had too many, I guess. The food was very, very lousy. We almost starved in there. But that was, again, explained later to me, and I believe it. The American supply didn't came as fast as the war ended. They were short. So the first day, and I thought that was pretty cool. They lined us all up, the new ones that came in, and there came an American sergeant who spoke perfectly German, and he would approach us with the words, "So, now think back of all your sins." And it was not very nicely done. And then they put a canvas out in front of us and said, everything you have on metal, throw on that canvas. Watches, rings, medals, anything. They want everything. Whatever happened to that, nobody knows. But those are the things that I guess after every war, the victor has the right to do anything. They treated us like dirt, really. And so Werner Fink was the one. They left us the music instruments for the musicians. They left it. They could keep it. But in that weather and in those tents, they're going to get ruined. So it had quit raining, and we found in our cage, which was pretty big, there were some empty gasoline barrels and some, I guess, 2x6s boards laying. And Werner Fink said, let's sit up. We had no way of contacting anybody or talk to anybody from the American side. Sit these boards across this gasoline barrels, get the music band up there and start playing Jitterbug. And somebody gonna come, And sure enough, took about half an hour. There were a few officers there and a few soldiers questioned what was going on. And so they told him that we were a variety group, and they had that established after the war in the hospital. We have played for American clubs, for German places, but if we are treated like this and here, the instruments will go out, and when we come out of here, we won't have no way of making a living, The very same night, a big truck came, loaded us up, and took us down to an airplane hangar. And they had converted that airplane hangar out of raw boards. They had made rooms upstairs, a platform. And in these rooms, there were bunks with blankets. We were in a dry, and all of a sudden we got better food. We had it made, and the band played maybe twice a week in a nearby town for an American enlistment club. So we had a girl that was a singer, but the girl had been separated before all that, While I did comedy, but I didn't speak English at that time, no more but yes or no. I just went with the band. I played a little violin myself, but I didn't have any. We switched off, We had it good for about, I guess we've been in there altogether 4 weeks. And then came our turn for being going home. Now, I was in a bad shape. I was from Danzig, from East Germany, and they had a, what do you call it, not a treaty, but, well, it was so that the Russians would send all prisoners from the West back to West Germany.
Yep. Was that the Potsdam Agreement or whatever?
Whatever it was, I don't know, was some agreement, or the Americans would send all the prisoners that all belong in the East back to East Germany. Well, at that time, the Americans didn't know that, and we didn't either, but they kept on sending prisoners over there by train, by freight trains, but the Russians didn't. And when they found that out, they stopped it too, but at the time I was supposed to be released. It was still that way, and I knew I was just going to go back there. The Russians going to send me to Siberia and another prison camp. That's all there's to it. And that's what they did. So my turn came, and there was an airplane hangar, big hall. There was a yellow line, and we stood in one line behind that yellow line, and there were desks set up. One desk here, 20 feet further, a desk. And there was the interrogator sitting, the American interrogator. And that was all organized. We were called in there by name. But you could not hear what they were talking. You couldn't step over that yellow line, so it was too far away. And my turn came, and just when he made so, the next one came up, So I walked up. He said, "Your name?" I said, "Karl Togert." So he digged the file there. Yep. He said, "Well, Karl, you understand that we have the entire Nazi file?" I said, "Yep." He said, "Does it bother you?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, I got your card right here, and that says you was an SS counter." He was teasing me, I said, "Well, if it says that, I just don't know when." I said I was in the war all the time in the cavalry and in the army. And he was laughing. He said, "No, you was no SS counter." He said, "What would you say if I say you can go home today?" I said, "I don't want to go home." He says, "What? What did you do at home?" I said, "I didn't do nothing. I barely was home. I was in the war all the time." "Oh," he said, "there are thousands of people in here. They want to go home, and you don't want to go home." I said, "No." He said, "Why?" I said, "Because communists are there." "Oh," he said, "What's wrong with communists?" I said, in that line, the conversation went, I said, "I don't like communists." He said, "Oh, you don't like our allies, huh?" He made it cynical. I said, "I didn't say that." He said, "I don't like communists." "Why not?" I said, "I never did. I've been fighting communism since I'm a kid." I said, "And I don't like him." He said, "Well, but they are our allies." I said, "Maybe so, but I don't like him." He says, "You don't like our allies." I said, "I didn't say that. You got other allies. You just don't only have communist allies, but the communist ones I don't like." He said, it went on for a while, back and forth. He said, "I'm going to have to send you there." I said, "I know, but you asked me if I like to go home." And I said, "No. If you ask me, I say no. If you have to, you have to." And that went on for quite a while, and he did a lot of studying, and then he always chewed on his pencil. And he said, "That's funny. I do this for months. Everybody that comes up here gonna say what I like to hear. You are the first German that looks right in my face and says different." I said, "Well, I was brought up that day. My daddy taught me, don't talk to please somebody, talk the truth and what you think." He said, "You know what, I respect that. I respect you for that." He said, "What would you do, suppose I did have the power and turned you loose in Bavaria, which is American occupied? Would you like Americans?" I said, I never had nothing against Americans. He says, oh, how come you've been fighting us? I said, do you hate all Germans? He said, no. I said, how come you've been fighting us? I said, aren't we in the same boat? And he grinned, he said, yeah, you're right. And he chewed on that pencil, and he chewed on that pencil. And all of a sudden he threw it down. He says, you know what, I'm going to get my tit in the ring if you don't keep your mouth shut. Do you have a place here in Bavaria where you could go and claim your home there? I said, yeah, a friend of mine came out here a few weeks ago. I got his address. He told me I can come there and start over again. I said, give me that address. He wrote it down. He said, anybody asks you what your hometown is, this is it, and always was, you understand? Anyone American. He said, get to the next counter, give him this for your hometown. He put the signature underneath, said, keep your mouth shut and good luck. And out I was. I wish I would know who that man was. But after that, on this I sort of, can we keep that off record? I tell it to you and then I prove it to you. When the war ended, my personal conclusion was, number one, I felt betrayed by my own people, by the so-called fatherland, by my government. I had, up to a certain extent, I say until the war, until we invaded France, supported as a youngster. And I felt that their wrongdoings, of which I did not know at that time, was a bad reflect, and their promises had been broken toward their people. And I was disgusted with the fatherland and thought it was the same thing with the Kaiser Wilhelm. And go back to the German emperors, always the same. And it always ended up in disaster, and the people suffered. But after this war, Europe was so torn apart, I definitely realized, in reality, there is no longer Germany, Great Britain, France, whatever you may call it, Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia. We got two things left in this world, a free world and a communist world. That was my conclusion. The rest, they exist, but they don't mean nothing. Wherever the big power Russia, where the Russian will put his big boot on, that's where he's going to stay. He's not going to move one step back. And in order to have a free world, I could not feel but believing the only way to keep that is supporting America, because America is the backbone of the free world. And that made me get into that. And my dream was, someday I want to be American, but I felt honestly also, I cannot just walk into America. I'm going to have to prove myself, and I did. I think I did.
Yes, I think you did. Tell me about your trip to America.
It came rather rapidly. My boss came into the office one day from headquarters in the afternoon. We can mention at this point that I worked at that time for the United States Armed Forces, Occupation Forces. And he said, Karl, how would you like to go to America? And he knew it was my dream, but he worded it that way, coming from Munich, from headquarters. And I said, I'd go tomorrow. I just wouldn't know how. He said, never mind how. You would like to go really and become a United States citizen, and you will not have an office job when you come over there. You might carry 100-pound bags or what. And I said, I don't care. If I get a chance to America, I do anything. He says, how does your wife feel about it? I said the same way. See, I'm married the second time. We both were widows and married. My first wife was from Germany. And he said, well, let's get in the car and talk to her about it. And I still didn't. I said, what's going on? He said, we want to find out if you want to go to America. So we drove 19 miles to my home, and Sam question appeared in front of my wife, and of course she agreed. She said, we both told him that we had talked about it before. And from here on, 6 months later, I was over here. I was supposed to be here 3 months later, but it was postponed. I wanted to go by airplane, and they only had ships. But then I ended up going by ship anyway, and that was in November. And I came over on the General Langford, which was an original troop transporter. It was a naval ship. And we hit a typhoon, and that was not an awful lot of pleasure in cold November in the middle of the Atlantic. And he came 1 year later, and we visited, and because he went over to the consulate and demanded, they said he goes in February. I was scheduled then for February by the consulate, and he demanded, no, he goes now, and that had a reason. And they said, okay, one choice, by ship. I said, yeah. They said, day after tomorrow. That was fast. I was half prepared for something like that, but not all. And so a year later, my boss visited with me, and I mentioned to him, now I always knew it was touchy, very touchy, but I didn't know it was touchy. He said, you wouldn't have lived until February. You didn't know it, but we did. That's what it amounted to. But that's all so long ago now, and it's obsolete, and I don't have no worries about that.
Any idea who the officer was that let you stay in Bavaria?
No, I wish I would. I really wish I would. No idea. There have been very many of them. That was in Bad Aibling, Bavaria, Germany.
What's the name of the town?
Bad Aibling. It is spelled B-A-D-AIBLING. Bad Aibling. It's somewhere near Rosenheim, which is not all too far from Munich. That was, if I would know who he is, I sure would like to look him up. There are several Americans I would like to find, but there's no way. I was looking, for instance, for a man, Hans Ullmann. He was Jewish. He was my boss in the earlier part of that business, and we lost contact, and of course, that was, I guess I knew him in 1947, 48. And I tried everything. I even found the last contact I had. I have a letter from him. He was somewhere in Lafayette, California, is that such a town? Yeah. Or Lafayette, something like that. I called there, and I called the installations down there, and nobody knew anything of him because it's so long time ago. All I knew, he was from New York. I tried over New York operators to find him. Now his name was Hans A, middle initial A, and we found one. That name was listed under A.H. Ullmann, the same name, but instead H.A. it was A.H. And I called her, and the lady answered. She said, no, sir, you got the wrong man, and I couldn't tell you nothing about it. That's as far as I got. I called the Red Cross. They said, yeah, if he would be in the army now, you could find him, but not after all these years. There's no way.
You might contact St. Louis.
I have thought of that.
Yeah.
Now, the files there have been burned to an extent.
They did have a fire up there. They didn't. I'm not sure how many of them burned.
Quite a bit, but I know they didn't all burn. That would be, yeah, I have considered that too. So that's about, I could tell you just as much as I told you about the entire war, about this 9 years, but I really don't.
Yeah.
Anything else in particular you would like to know?
No, not really. I think we've covered everything basically.
Yeah, I think I have told that story.
We've talked almost 3 hours.
Yeah. Hmm. Oh, I didn't mind that. I have a very good memory in general. I always was known for that over there.
Yeah.
I never took a